Super humble. Thank you, everybody, for showing up. I appreciate it. Appreciate your time. And without further ado, let me see if I can go ahead and get this party started. All righty. So, and if I'm boring, just speak up. Be like, yo, dude, you're dragging us on, son. Like, yo, we're here like to have fun, not to go to sleep, right? Everybody loves horror. Make it fun. All right, here we go. Okay, so I am Freak Fineman. I'm presenting today the history of horror, 40 years in the making. I am 49 years old, and I will get into why I love horror so much in just a few. So this is brought to us by and brought to you by TCG Collective and 42nd Parallel. I'm super honored to have the floor today, and I thank everybody for taking out the time to share a little giggle with me today. So, what in Sam's hell's name is a Freak Fineman, and what qualifies him to even be here today? Unfortunately, I can't answer that question, but I can kind of let you know a little bit of what I've done in the space of music and horror. So back in the day, when I came to New York, I worked with a DJ named Roger Sanchez, kind of like in his early days as he was kind of climbing the ladder of success in the house music realm. And so we got an opportunity to place a song on the soundtrack of the Blade soundtrack, which was the first MCU cinematic universe, Marvel Cinematic Universe picture. And I played all the instruments on Roger Sanchez's track called Wreck the Discotheque. That was number 11 on that soundtrack. So that was pretty cool. That was kind of like my, I guess my cherry was popped in the music industry. So I was, kind of official, not feeling myself, but hey, you know what? I love horror. Been loving horror my whole life. So finally I have a song placement with a good buddy of mine on a horror soundtrack. So it's pretty cool. So I've worked on remixes for Madonna, produced a record for 50 Cent, Eminem, Dr. Dre, worked with them, worked with Beyonce, Jay-Z, and a lot of other people. So pretty much, I love the space of horror. I've always been into it. Got two mentors that have helped me out, helped me kind of refine my production and really got me inundated into the whole realm of horror Hollywood, because I'm aspiring at some point, I don't know when, to really do my own movie. But as you probably know, that you have to like work up to it. So got to kind of get your feet wet in the space and then transition, kind of like what Rob Zombie has done. I want to do that eventually. So I have kind of recruited two of the dopest people in the horror space to mentor me. So one, his name is Ken Foree, and we'll get into him later. The other is Gary Sales. We'll get into him later. And what is pretty cool is I've been doing horror, my blogs. I got a couple blogs I've been doing for quite some time. And I got the attention of Tony Todd, who was the original Candyman. And what was really cool, he hit me up and started following me. And then we started DMing each other. Come to find out, he and Ken are really, really good friends. So I'll get into that later. And so he became kind of like a fan of mine. And he's been following my work for the last 6 years. And so even in that space, there's a lot of people that kind of pay attention because the horror community is kind of like a tight-knit community. And so one thing that was really cool a few weeks ago when The Haunting of Bly Manor came out, Netflix and the company that put it out gave me a shout out on my Twitter page. So I was like, wow, you know what? I must be doing something okay in this horror space. And, to get recognition is just cool. I'm a humble dude. I don't take anything for granted. I'm not egocentric. Like, I count all my blessings, and I'm just really, really appreciative for anybody who just lends me their ear. So moving forward, what is horror and what defines a horror movie? So horror is an intense feeling of fear, shock, or disgust. And a horror film is one that seeks to elicit fear in its audience for entertainment purposes. And so the word horror to describe the film genre would not be used until the 1930s when Universal Pictures began releasing their horror films, which is so awesome. Like, such a huge fan of the Universal monster classic movies. So what was the first horror movie? So the first depictions of the supernatural on screen appeared in several of the short silent films created by the French pioneer filmmaker Georges. I'm not French, and if I'm butchering his name, this is the appropriate venue to butcher anyone. So I apologize if I'm pronouncing his name wrong. Georges Méliès in the late 1890s. The best known of these early supernatural-based works is the 2.5-minute short film Les Maneurs du Diable in 1896, known in English as both The Haunted Castle or The House of the Devil. And The House of the Devil was later remade in 2009 by writer-director Ty West, and it was super, super dope. So the film is sometimes credited as being the first ever horror film. And after the horror film, you'll see that little dash in YT. You'll be able to find these movies on YouTube. The ones that I kind of like have it in parentheses, YT, you can find those on YouTube. All right, so this is the first poster for Le Maneur du Diable in 1896. Took a little while to find that online, but I was able to find it. And to the right is The House of the Devil, the remake. The poster art is pretty cool. And that was such a really, really creepy movie. I don't want to give away any spoilers, but if you haven't seen it, definitely check it out. It's worth the watch. So the spread of horror internationally. So this is for my people supporting Japanese and Japanese house music here in the crowd. So Japan made several films in the horror genre. In 1898, a Japanese film company called Konishi Honten released 2 silent horror films, both written by Ichiro Hata. Hopefully I said that correct. And these were Shinin no Sosai, Resurrection of a Corpse, and Bake Jizo, the Spook, which I love that name. It's kind of creepy and crazy. I might even make a song with that title if I can. So the film Resurrection of a Corpse told the story of a dead man who comes back to life after having fallen from a coffin that 2 men were carrying. So pretty much what I'm thinking, that's the first official zombie film. So, a dead man who comes back to life. So, I guess that's where people kind of got that scenario from. So the writer Hata played the dead man in the role, which is pretty cool. So I thought that was awesome to, further research that. So the spread of horror internationally continues. So Spanish film, for all my Spanish people in the house, Spanish filmmaker Segundo de Chomon is also one of the most significant silent film directors in early filmmaking. He was so dope because he was popular for his signature camera tricks and optical illusions. Like, he did stuff that pretty much, like, he was the camera version of Harry Houdini. And in that space, no one did that before. So his famous works include Satan se divierte in 1907, which translates to Satan having fun, super cool, or Satan at play. And La Casa Hechizada in 1908, or The House of Ghosts, is considered to be the first haunted house film, which is so dope. So Le Spectre Rogue 1901, or The Red Spectre, was a collaboration film with French director Ferdinand Zecca about a demonic magician who attempts to perform his acts in a mysterious grotto. And so you'll be able to find Le Spectre Rogue on YouTube as well. So I checked all these out, you guys, and they're like super creepy and really kind of not really basic, but for that time, they were amazing and truly groundbreaking. And this is all part of the silent film revolution, which was really cool because, these actors and actresses, they couldn't speak. So they had to translate their emotions and their fear and their anxiety in like contorted body forms, which is like super cool. And I can't even imagine, being that type of method actor where you can't speak and everything that you have to convey to your audience is done in some type of like contorted, movement. So I thought that was really, really cool. These groundbreaking producers and directors, they were really influential on like the current space that we watch now. So let's segue into horror in the USA. So in 1908, the Selig Polyscope Company in the USA produced the silent film Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, directed by Otis Turner and starring Hobart Bosworth in the lead role. And this is also on YouTube, but you're not going to find Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde dated in 1908 on YouTube. For some reason, it's dated 1920. So in 1922, F.W. Marno made the first silent vampire-themed movie, Nosferatu, which you can find on YouTube. Dope, super dope, incredible. It was an unauthorized adaptation of Bram Stoker's gothic horror novel, Dracula. And Nosferatu has some of cinema's most lasting and haunting imagery, which famously involves shadows of the creeping Count Orlok. And one misconception is Nosferatu, that wasn't his name. That is the name of Dracula. So Dracula has a couple of names, but Count Orlok was his own kind of entity. And this helped popularize the expressionism style in filmmaking, which emphasizes a distorted reality. So pretty much what Count Orlok did is he pretty much took the whole expressionism style and just took it to another level. So in 1979, Nosferatu the Vampire, which is really cool how they spelled it, Vampyre, like a funeral pyre, like a flame, was remade by director Werner Herzog, who is incredible. So Nosferatu is arguably the first true horror film. So it's like when anybody in the horror space like thinks of the first film, it's always going to be like pretty much Nosferatu. But if they watch this, then they'll know it wasn't. So found a couple of dope pictures that I thought you'd enjoy of Nosferatu. The one on the left is the original version, and the one on the right is the remake version. I still think, Hollywood is in the process right now of remaking it again for the second time, but I don't think they'll ever come close to the original because it was just so creepy, and it was filmed in 8mm. 16mm wasn't even invented yet, and it was just so grainy and creepy. And the movement of Count Orlok just looked like a cut frame, which it wasn't. It was just, technology had not been refined at that time. And it's just like so awesome how he moved. And there's trickery that you can do now to kind of replicate it, but sometimes the original film should just be left alone. So moving along. The rise of Universal classic monsters in the 1920s. So in 1923, Universal Pictures started producing movies based on Gothic horror literature from authors like Victor Hugo and Edgar Allan Poe. The series of silent pictures from Universal Pictures have become the first phase of the studio's Universal Classic Monster series that will continue for 3 more decades. So kind of, it's so funny how, like, when I think of that, kind of think of like the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and nothing is really original, which is cool because you gotta have a past to create your future. And I think that a lot of the modern Hollywood companies, they're really borrowing from horror, which I think is so cool. But the horror space is not being recognized for the influence. So Universal Pictures' classic monsters of the 1920s featured hideously deformed characters like Quasimodo, 1923, the Phantom of the Opera, 1925, and Gwynplaine, the Man Who Laughs, who is really not really that famous in that movie space. But I'm going to show you guys something in a few. So check this out. So Quasimodo was the first film of the series, and it was The Hunchback of Notre Dame in 1923, starring Lon Chaney as the Hunchback Quasimodo. And so if you guys look to the picture on the right there, that makeup was really groundbreaking. So, they didn't have the huge budget for prosthetics. They pretty much had to find whatever they could in the garage, in the work shed, or really under the sink. So this silent film was adapted from the classic French Gothic novel of the same name, written by Victor Hugo in 1833, about a horribly deformed bell ringer in the Cathedral of Notre Dame. And Disney has gone ahead and done a remake, which was like really beautiful and really just sad in a sense. But the original was really creepy. It wasn't meant to be that way, but just the disfigurement of of Lon Chaney as Quasimodo kind of made people feel uneasy when he just worked in the cathedral as the bell ringer, So I thought that was really cool. And the film elevated Lon Chaney, already a well-known character actor, to full star status in Hollywood, and also helped set a standard for many later horror films. So The Phantom, which is like one of my favorite. The second film of the series was The Phantom of the Opera in 1925, starring Lon Chaney as the Phantom. This silent film was adapted from Gaston Leroux's 1910 novel, La Phantom de Opera, a about a deformed, and again, here we go again with the deformed. Everything seems to be deformed in these silent films, these characters. A deformed phantom who haunts the Paris Opera House, causing murder and mayhem in an attempt to make the woman he loves a star. So the film remains the most famous for Chaney's ghastly self-devised makeup, which was kept a studio secret until the film's premiere. And Chaney did all of his own makeup using wax and false teeth. And I thought that was crazy because what he did, he took wood glue and took like slivers of wood, and he would paint them yellow. Well, I mean, it's in black and white, but I later went on to read that he would paint them yellow in the studio, in the makeup room. And he would actually take a piece of cellophane, and somehow he did it in like chewing gum and wax. I think chewing gum was another component of it. And so he would make the gums and then protrude the pieces, the slivers of wood out of the wax to make it look like super authentic. And then to even, the accentuated cheekbones and the eyebrows, he used wax on that as well and cover up makeup to make that look just like so weird. And even when you watch the movies, the contour in the shadows just really makes him look like this is a real character opposed to like someone with makeup. All right, moving right along. Gwynplaine, this is pretty cool. The third film of the series was Gwynplaine, The Man Who Laughs in 1928, an adaptation of another Victor Hugo novel. So this film starring Conrad Veidt is known for the bleak carnival freak-like grin of the character Gwynplaine's face. So his exaggerated smile was the inspiration for DC Comics' The Joker, as we can completely see. So a graphic novel in 2005 exploring the origins of the Joker was also titled Batman, The Man Who Laughs, in homage to this film. So another thing, again, we got the Marvel Cinematic Universe kind of borrowing from Universal. And then now, again, Universal, we got the Joker, who DC completely like borrowed from, that company. So I thought that was really cool as well. So the sound revolution in horror films. Between 1928 and 1930, silent films were replaced by the all-talkie sound on film production. Movie studios built sound stages and cinemas were rewired with sound equipment to accommodate the demand for sound on film production. So prior to sound on film production, a pianist, theater organist, or even in large cities like New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, a small orchestra would often play music to accompany the films. So just sit and think, like, how amazing would that be? Like you go to, the films with your friends or significant other or whoever, and you sit down and there's like a tiny orchestra that's like taking you through the experience of these films. It's kind of sad that this doesn't exist anymore, because that would be like super cool just to experience, like, and maybe even like a black tie event would kind of be cool in that space as well. So unfortunately, like many of the stars of the silent period were trained mimes and lacked the appropriate screen voice, and they were replaced with performers from vaudeville, Broadway, and radio. So a lot of those initial silent film horror actors and even the silent film actors were replaced by, the speaking role actors and actresses. So in 1928, The Terror by Warner Brothers Pictures was the first all-talking horror film made using the Vitaphone sound on disc system. So this film tells a simple story of guests at an old English manor being stalked by a mysterious killer known as the Terror. And what is really cool is the plot centered on sound. So with much of the ghost haunting taking place in vis-a-vis, which means like face to face, like really, really in your face intrusively, creepy organ music, creaking doors, and howling winds. So with the kind of like within the sound revolution, they were getting very innovative and pretty much creating sound design on the set to make, I guess, shadows kind of have their own presence and their own characters. So that was super, super cool. How like, now sound being implemented into the pictures is going to evolve. So 1930s Universal classic monsters, golden era. So in this decade, the studios assembled several iconic monsters in motion picture history, including Dracula, Frankenstein, my all-time favorite monster ever, The Mummy and The Invisible Man. Each movie starring these monsters would go on to make sequels. Here we go again. And each of the characters would go on to cross over. Here we go again with one another in a cinematic shared universe. All right, kudos to Universal and these four ghouls. So the films would retroactively be classified together as part of the Universal Classic Monsters series. Not only did Universal bring the subgenre of creature feature into the limelight, they also gave them their golden years producing stars such as Bela Lugosi and Boris Karloff. So in the 1920s, the studio only put out 5 features because that was silent films. So in the 30s, however, they produced about 21, which is cool because everybody was like loving the sound and the sound effects and actually hearing these monsters speak or growl or make noises. So the films would retroactively be classified together as part of the Universal Classic Monsters series. This is my man, you guys and gals. Like, I was probably around 5 or 6 years old when my dad and I were at home in Chicago watching Son of Spangoolie. And I remember this plain as day. This movie came on, and instead of being scared, I was like, yo, you know, I'm thinking back to that time. It's really vague. I don't have like a photographic or photogenic memory or anything like that, but I can remember the first time I saw this face. And what comes to mind too is when Frankenstein gave the flower to the little girl. I thought that was like a beautiful scene because he was really misunderstood. And actually, I worked with a producer and musician, rapper named Fat Man Scoop. And when we went to the studio in Times Square, actually we rented out we were in Quad Studios and we rented out the studio room where Tupac got shot. I was wearing the Frankenstein monster t-shirt. And Scoop was like, yo, man, dude, do you know he was like the ultimate badass, like the most influential kind of, you know, monster ever. It's like when anybody mimics a monster, they always like extend their arms, drop their wrists to the ground, and then they like walk with stiff legs. And that's kind of like super cool when he said that. So on November 21st, 1931, Universal Pictures released another hit film with Frankenstein. The story is about a scientist and his assistant, Fritz, who dug up corpses in the hopes to reanimate them with electricity. The experiment goes awry when Dr. Frankenstein's assistant accidentally gives the creature a murderer's abnormal brain. And I thought that was super, super cool, like how they showed that in the black and white film. So in 1931's Frankenstein was based on a 1927 play by Peggy Webling, which in turn was based on Mary Shelley's classic book in 1818, the Gothic novel Frankenstein. So the film was directed by James Whale and stars Boris Karloff as Frankenstein's monster in one of his most iconic roles. And, you know, contrary to popular belief and popular understanding, the monster is not called Frankenstein. Whenever you see the monster, you always think, oh, that's Frankenstein. No, that was Frankenstein's monster. And Jack Pierce, Karloff's iconic makeup artist, has influenced the careers of Dick Smith, who did all the makeup for Linda Blair in The Exorcist. Rick Baker, he did the werewolf scene in An American Werewolf in London, and he did all of the prosthetics for the Thriller video for Michael Jackson as well. Stan Winston, who pretty much has the biggest horror company to date, he passed away not too long ago. He's responsible for Harry and the Hendersons, The Terminator, you name it. One of my favorites, Rob Bottin, his first major film was The Thing. John Carpenter's The Thing, and he did all of the animatronics and like all the puppetry. And then another one of my favorites was Tom Savini. Tom Savini did all of Jason's makeup, like as a boy in the first Friday the 13th, he did the little boy, Jason as a boy. And the second one, he did the disfigurement. The third one, he did all the disfigurement as Jason's face as well. So Jack Pierce, because of Frankenstein's monster and the success that it had, he like birthed the careers of some of the biggest makeup and prosthetic artists to date. So I thought that was awesome too. So the 5 elements of horror and genres. So like the 5 elements of hip hop, if you don't know, is b-boying, which is breakdancing, MCing, spitting, graffiti, can't forget the graffiti artist, DJing, and beatboxing. And horror has 5 elements as well: the story, fear, surprise, suspense, and mystery. And there's also 5 genres of horror. So the slasher horror, which is a systemic haunting of an unknown assailant, movies like Halloween, Michael Myers, Friday the 13th, Madman, Madman Mars. Zombie horror, the attack of the living dead, creatures that are reanimated for some reason. They never, like Night of the Living Dead, really never explained how these corpses came back to life. I've been searching for that. George A. Romero never really said how they came back. I know in The Return of the Living Dead, they said that there was a chemical that the government spread on marijuana in Vietnam, that the dead bodies were shipped back in canisters or something like that. Don't know. So Night of the Living Dead are examples of zombie horror genre. Dawn of the Dead and the movie Zombie itself. Folk horror is the terror of the unknown in natural or rural regions. So you have movies like Children of the Corn, The Wicker Man, and Midsummer, which was crazy. Just a really bugged out film. If you haven't seen it, it's by a director, writer, Ari Aster, and it's just bugged out. My wife and I went to the movies to see it, and we're not really like scathed by anything. And her favorite film of all time is The Exorcist, so we're like a great pair. We're kind of freaked out, and it takes a lot to freak us out. So the fourth in the genre is body horror, which examines the horrors of the human body. There's a movie called Videodrome, which is really cool. Really recommend you to see this. The Fly and Aliens. I guess body horror in a nutshell is anytime your body is disfigured by, I guess, the cross-contamination of a fly or an alien popping out your chest or what have you. And then last but not least, found footage, events seen from the camera by one or more victims. So everybody knows what found footage is. The Blair Witch Project example, Paranormal Activity, and VHS Part 1 and 2, for example. So iconic directors and their films. So I put together kind of like a list of my favorites. And if I missed any, I apologize. There's just, compiling this, there were so many to put in, and I just didn't kind of want to babble, along kind of like I'm doing now. I just wanted to really pinpoint some of the directors that are just really influential. And all of this is weird, because I do ballads, I do R&B music, I do all styles. I don't really have a style. I play every instrument, but the thing is, when I create music, I always have a horror movie playing in the background. And I just draw my inspiration from just, it's not the killing, not the gore, it's just the creativity, how, a lot of these makeup artists and prosthetic artists, they have to take anatomy classes. So they have to know the human body literally inside and out to kind of create the morbid scenes of decapitation and what have you. So I know Stephen King is not a director, but he is a writing genius. Of course, he's famous for It, The Mist, Misery, Christine, Carrie. The list goes on and on and on. James Whale, my all-time favorite. He did Frankenstein. So kind of like I'm a comic book freaking nerd. And so Jack Kirby is my favorite illustrator of all time. He did all the first, Fantastic Four, Avengers, Spider-Man for Stan Lee. So James Whale will always be like my favorite because he created my favorite, one of my favorite movies, but my favorite monster. So Sir Alfred Hitchcock, best known for Psycho, The Birds, Vertigo, William Friedkin, The Exorcist, Stanley Kubrick, The Shining, David Cronenberg, Videodrome, The Fly, John Landis, American Werewolf in London, which is amazing. Richard Donner, The Omen, classic. Ridley Scott, Alien. Nia DaCosta, which a lot of people, there's not too many females in the horror space. And I think that's kind of sad because I love a woman's approach to anything. And also to horror just really, really, kind of takes it over the top. There's a woman named Millicent Patrick, and Millicent Patrick created the creature from the Black Lagoon. She literally drew it out and then constructed the costume from scratch. So I thought that was incredible. Dan O'Brien, the director and writer for Return of the Living Dead, which is pretty much in my top 5 zombie horror films. Roman Polanski, Rosemary's Baby. And the sad thing, everybody probably knows about Roman Polanski, his wife was Sharon Tate. And Rosemary's Baby was like such an iconic film. When I was living in New York, I used to purposely walk by the apartment complex that they filmed this in, which is called the Dakota, where John Lennon was actually living, and he got assassinated right in the front. Rosie O'Donnell lived there, Maxwell lived there, Madonna lived there for quite a long time. And it looks just like a haunted castle. And so he made this movie, and there's a kind of like a history of witchcraft and the occult that has been going on in that apartment complex for years. But tragedy befell Roman Polanski after he made this movie. And I always kind of thought, like, man, that's super sad that, what Marilyn Manson, and his cronies did, the horror that befell Roman Polanski after he made this movie. So I always kind of keep that in the back of my mind, like every time I watch Rosemary's Baby. And I really don't try to watch it that much because it kind of makes me like a little sad. Moving along to Sam Raimi, The Evil Dead 2. He also did the first Spider-Man 1, 2, and 3. And then we have Tobe Hooper, who I love. Tobe Hooper did the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and Steven Spielberg loved that movie so much that he asked Tobe Hooper to direct Poltergeist. So I thought that was like incredibly awesome. You got Steven Spielberg, Mr. Jaws, Star Wars, and all that. He created this film and wanted this like super creepy, macabre director to direct his movie. So, and then we have Jaws, Steven Spielberg, Wes Craven, A Nightmare on Elm Street, Scream, A Nightmare on Elm Street. I watch that at least once a month. It's so dope. I love it. Scream, I thought it was genius. I can't wait for Scream 5 to come out next year. We got Clyde Barker, who created Hellraiser and the sequels. Mary Lambert, here we go. Kudos to another sister out here. She made Pet Sematary. Stephen King asked her to direct it, which I think was super dope. So he pretty much commissioned her, from, I guess, all of these, Tobe Hoopers and Sam Raimi's and Dan O'Brien's. He thought that there was something very special in her for her to convey, the pages on his book onto the silver screen. And I think she did a phenomenal job. So we have my man, Eli Roth, who did Cabin Fever and Hostel, Tom Holland, Child's Play, main man, Jordan Peele, Get Out, and Us, who is also working, actually finished the new Candyman. And spoiler out there, Tony Todd will reprise his role as one of the Candymen in the new film. So my personal friend, Ken Hoyt, he did his first movie a couple years ago called Mollywood, and it's a slasher. It's in the slasher genre. It's really creepy, pretty good. I really liked his approach to it. Him and his homie Morocco Von. Morocco has done videos for Nicki Minaj, Lil Wayne. And so they kind of like put their talents together and did a slasher film, which was really crazy because Ken hit me up. He's like, dude, I got a script. This is what I'm doing and check it out. And I was like, dude, like you're doing a horror movie? He's like, hell yeah, man, I'm doing a horror movie. I was like, man, I thought you would do like some kind of like, not to stereotype or anything, but just like some type of, socially conscious film or something like that, or he's like, man, I'm doing a horror film. And I was like, yo, man, can I get some songs in it? He's like, yeah, man, send me some stuff. So the movie Mollywood, that's distributed by, I believe it's E1, is out on all streaming platforms. And I have 3 songs placed in that horror movie, which is pretty cool. So Rob Zombie, which I really, really love, and sorry for the typo, it's supposed to be House of 1,000 Corpses, not Hose of 1,000 Corpses. We got Halloween, his remake in 2017, and The Devil's Rejects, which Ken Foree, my man, was in. And then we have Francis Ford Coppola, who did Dracula, and Francis Ford is just a legend anyway. We got James Wan, who did The Conjuring and Saw, one of my favorites. Robert Eggers, who did The Witch and The Lighthouse. And if you haven't seen The Lighthouse with William Dafoe, it's creepy as all get out. It's like super unexpected how like it turned out. And then my man, Ari Aster, please check out Hereditary if you haven't seen it. Hereditary was just groundbreaking, just such a freaking horrible movie. It was just, I mean, horrible in like a great sense. But again, I'm not really shocked by anything. Ari did Midsummer, which I was totally shocked by. Hereditary, I was shocked by. So those are some cool films for everybody to check out. Moving along. So my favorite directors, I have two kind of like modern time favorite directors. George Andrew Romero, born February 4th, 1940. He passed July 16th, 2017. He was an American filmmaker, writer, and editor. And also, too, he created music. So he kind of co-scored the music in all of his films, which he's never given credit for. So he's best known for his Night of the Living Dead film in 1968. So Night of the Living Dead is an American independent film written, directed, photographed, and edited and scored by George A. Romero, co-written by John Russo, who is also a really cool director, and starring Dwayne Jones and Judith O'Dea. I have issues with this film, and just my issues are like social issues. This was kind of, when people talk about tropes and kind of like the stereotypes in films, it's always like the black dude dies first. So that's been synonymous in so many films. And I guess it's kind of like cliche. And it seems like the studios are getting away from it now. But, I really had issues in the beginning with this film until I saw a documentary with George Romero, and he explained why Dwayne Jones was murdered at the end. So, Dwayne Jones and Judith O'Dea, they go through a living hell. And Judith O'Dea dies, Dwayne Jones lives. And so it's in Pennsylvania, like rural Pennsylvania, where he had to like find refuge in a house and like kind of barricade himself in, to protect himself from the zombie horde. So he gets through everything. And there's kind of like this militia of gentlemen. And he makes it all the way to the end of the film. And so, he looks out the window and they shoot him in the head. And then, so what they do, they shoot him in the head. They, grab this meat hook, they drag him out to this fire and they burn him. And so I was like, when I first saw it, I was like, man, this dude, he endured everything. He killed, like his body count was like Rambo. You know what I'm saying? Like Schwarzenegger, this dude killed all these zombies and then he got to the end and then he was killed. So what George Romero said, he did it purposely because of racism in America. And he's like, look, I know people weren't happy with that. I made the movie back in the day. He's like, I made this movie in the 60s, the end of the 60s. You had the Black Panthers, you had the Civil Rights Movement, you had Angela Davis, there were things going on, you had lynchings, you had, there's a lot of social commentary involved in this film. And he was like, look, I wanted to make it whereas that, you're rooting, whoever you are, you're rooting for this Black man to survive. And then these people they strip his life away from him. He endured all of this just to die. And so, once I kind of understood that and he was making a statement, I was like, man, that's really cool. He took a lot of flack for that. Also, this was his first film and he made the leading man Black. He really took a chance. So in light of that, Night of the Living Dead has been regarded as a cult classic by film scholars and critics, despite being heavily criticized upon its release for its explicit gore. And one thing that I thought was really cool is that he filmed it in black and white to kind of like really accentuate black and white people. And, I think it was really like his thought process behind that was super genius. When I saw it, I was a younger person, kind of mad. And then when I understood like why he did it, I have the greatest regard for him, the greatest respect for him, and get into another thing in a couple more slides, why he has literally changed my life. So Night of the Living Dead eventually garnered critical acclaim and was selected in 1999 by the U.S. Library of Congress for preservation in the National Film Registry as a film deemed culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant. And there you go. So it wasn't in vain. I guess what's really cool is the National Film Registry recognized his premise And now this is like, the equivalent of being in the Smithsonian. So kudos to Romero. And Romero has written, directed, and produced Dawn of the Dead, Night of the Living Dead, of course, Day of the Dead, Creep Show, Land of the Dead, Diary of the Dead. And he's also been involved in producing TV shows as well before he passed in 2017. So my second favorite director is John Howard Carpenter. So before I get into his little bio, I'm 49 years old. When I was 7 years old, I literally begged my dad to take me to the movies on opening weekend to see Halloween. Siskel and Ebert, we used to watch that in Chicago. Siskel and Ebert, I think they had really good taste. They broke down films, and they said this film was incredibly, incredibly creepy. It was like a nightmare come true on the silver screen. So begged my dad to take me to go see it. He's like, yeah, man, you know what? You want to see it? You're 7 years old. This is a really creepy film, but hey, don't have nightmares. So he took me and my brother Lee to North Riverside Mall, and we went to see Halloween. That was like the scariest movie I've ever seen. I've seen Frankenstein when I was younger, around 5, 6 years old. That was really cool. Creature of the Black Lagoon, the vampire movies, all that stuff. But to be honest, nothing impacted me like Halloween. I'm 7 years old. There was a sex scene in it, which I didn't mind too much. There wasn't really too much blood in it. And it was just a super duper creepy film. So that I've actually become quite obsessed with horror. I have become quite obsessed with horror since 1978, and it continues to this day. So John Howard Carpenter is an American filmmaker, screenwriter, and composer who works with various film genres. Halloween 1978, I think this and Frankenstein and Dawn of the Dead, Madman, those are my favorite films. So Halloween 1978, starring Jamie Lee Curtis and Donald Pleasance, is his most successful film to date and continues to be one of the highest grossing independent films of all time. The plot tells about a mental patient, Michael Myers, who was committed to Smiths Grove Sanitarium for murdering his teenage sister, Judith Myers, on Halloween night when he was 6 years old. And that's kind of crazy too. So, the opening scene is it was the first POV shot ever in cinema with the Halloween mask, and he butchers his sister, and he was 6 years old. And I thought that was incredibly creepy. So 15 years later, he escapes and returns to his hometown, Haddonfield, Illinois. Kudos, shout out to Chicago, Illinois, where he stalks a female babysitter, Laurie Strode, and her friends. While under pursuit by his psychiatrist, which is Dr. Loomis, played by Donald Pleasance, R.I.P. Donald Pleasance. So many of Carpenter's films from the 70s and 80s have come to be considered as cult classics. Very true. And it has been acknowledged as one of the most influential filmmakers of all time. I mean, he influenced everybody. One kind of side note is the year E.T. came out, John Carpenter came out with a movie called The Thing, which Bottin did the makeup for. That movie was a box office flop. If you go see E.T. and you see this really, cute, friendly alien who, befriends Elliot and, does all these groovy things. And, we made contact and he leaves to return again. It's just a beautiful thing. The Thing takes place in Antarctica, where 100,000 years ago, an alien spacecraft crashed in the Arctic, and a Nordic excavation team dug it up. And this thing could mimic any human or animal, and it was hell-bent on destroying the human race. So, people went into The Thing thinking that it was going to be not as graphic or gory, and they slammed it because it wasn't, really friendly film like E.T. But it's one of my favorite films. If you haven't seen it, the puppetry is really good. The prosthetics are amazing. The story makes you feel very claustrophobic, which I kind of like movies that make me feel paranoid and claustrophobic. And it was just a great film. So moving right along. So here come my mentors and musical inspirations. So Ken Foree is a relative of mine. He's a cousin through my cousin, Jerry Lacey in Chicago. And I didn't find this out until maybe like 10 years ago. And Ken and I, we speak constantly. Actually, he is away on business, producing a film overseas, and he wasn't able to join us because he would totally have joined us today and spoke with everybody. And that's why he's not here. But Ken Foree is an American actor, producer, writer, and filmmaker, best known for his character Peter Washington in George A. Romero's 1978 zombie classic, Dawn of the Dead. So the dope thing about Dawn of the Dead, I'm gonna segue back into how George Romero changed my life. So prior to me knowing that Ken Foree is a distant cousin by marriage, this was the film where the black guy did not die at the end. He was the hero. And, you know, growing up in Chicago, my dad was my hero. Loved Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen. You know, those were heroes. Walter Payton was a hero. You know, you had all these upstanding, influences. And so, you know, my love for horror, I'm going into this movie, you know, very apprehensive, like, oh man, you know, is this kind of going to be a repeat of Night of the Living Dead? Even though I'm a little older now, I totally understand and agree with the plot and why Romero did this. But what was very significant to me and just very inspirational is that Ken Foree, who played Peter Washington, my cousin, he lived. And he actually saved Galen Ross, his counterpart. He saved her life and she was pregnant. And it was kind of like a beautiful thing because at the very end of the film, he actually was fighting zombies to save Galen Ross. But, you know, he decided, you know, he was going to stay there and just fight them off. But she convinced him to leave. And then, like, at the very, very last moment when you think he's going to commit suicide, he lived. And that was like so dope, so inspirational. It's just really cool. And as I, come to find out that Ken was my cousin, he and we hit it off. And, you know, for the longest now, I speak to him as often as I can. He's super busy making films and all that, but he just really, inspired me to be the best that I can be and to be as original as possible. And he and I, about a year and a half ago, we met in LA at John Legend's studio, and we produced and wrote our first song together, which is going to be released at some point next year in one of Ken's new films. We just don't know which one. So George A. Romero's 1978 zombie classic, Dawn of the Dead, Foree, that was like just the most awesome movie. Like I've said that like a million times. So the 1978 zombie classic Dawn of the Dead is just forever like inundated in my soul as like one of the greatest or the greatest zombie movie in my eyes. And so Foree has starred in the hit horror films From Beyond, which is crazy, which is kind of like a satire. You should see it. It was never meant to be taken serious at all. It's like super crazy, gory H.P. Lovecraft horror film. From Beyond 1986, Leatherface, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3, which he is the hero, which he whoops Leatherface's ass, which was dope. Dawn of the Dead, 2004, the remake. And The Devil's Rejects, Rob Zombie's Halloween, Lords of Salem. And again, freaking Foree, we have composed a song, and the song together is called Palaveras. That kind of means like mayhem, and we're going to release that song in 2021. So now, my main man, Gary Sales. So kind of got to get into this guy here. So I worked at a video store called Broadview Home Video when I was around maybe 10 years old. It was owned by the Chicago, one of the mafia families from Cicero, Illinois. And one of the underbosses is so funny. It's crazy. My life is like just really, really crazy. So one of the underbosses, his name was Fat Al. He owned the store, and I know it was a front for whatever. So, he had all of his paisanos in there, and we had a membership. My family and I had a membership to the video store, and it was right down the street from us on Roosevelt Road. And after school, I used to go in there, pick out movies. Fat Al would always be like, "Hey, kid, you come in here so much. You know what? Make yourself useful. Go in the back there and rewind those tapes." So I give you $5, and I got some nuggets here from Popeyes with some extra mild sauce. You're welcome to them. I was like, oh man, cool. So Fat Al in the back, they had all kinds of movies. Like they had a really small, minute horror section. His films were pretty much like the action adventure films. They had some adult films, which I wasn't able to rewind, which was pretty cool. Yes, but he always like, he was a nice guy, and he was always like encouraging me to, take home horror films. It's like so weird. So I don't know what the underlying meaning of that was, but what I would do is, there would be a stack of movies. And so it was crazy. He had 2 video recorders. He didn't have those speed rewind things. Those weren't even in production at that time. And if they were, he was too cheap to even buy them. So there were a couple VHS machines there. So I would take the tapes, rewind them. And there was a movie called Madman. And the cover of it was like super cool. It was like the silhouette of this fat burly dude with an axe. And I was like, yo, okay, this is like really, really weird. All right. So I asked Al at the end of, my little shift, which only considered, he didn't want to violate any child labor laws. And I'm sure, he could have greased the palms of anybody who would have said otherwise. But he let me take this film home. This is in the 80s. I took this film home and I watched it. And I watched it with my dad. And I think I watched it with my brother Lee. And it was like groundbreaking. It was so dope. The way it was filmed was like incredible. It's actually my favorite slasher film. My favorite slasher film over Halloween. Halloween is just like one of my all-time favorite films. This is my favorite slasher film, period. It just has its own presence. It's creepy as all get out. It's totally original. It's just dope. So Gary Sales is an American writer, director, scoring musician, and producer, best known for the 1981 horror cult classic Madman. Madman is one of Academy Award winning director Quentin Tarantino's favorite slasher films, and is in Joe Bob Briggs, who is super dope. He's like an iconic horror critic. It's in his top 10 list of drive-in movie classics. So like Gary Sales, the producer of this film, is like on Quentin Tarantino's radar, and is involved in like all of his like film festivals, slasher film festivals, the whole nine. So I'm honored to be a friend and a brother of Gary Sales. So Sales credits include Vampire's Kiss, 88, Key West, 93, The Girl on the Train, which was super dope, and I didn't even know he was involved in that major motion picture. So he and we released a song entitled The Madman, a tribute to Paul W. Ehlers, who played the Madman, and he's still alive. So you guys go check him out on all digital platforms. This is also featured on the Alamo Drafthouse Mondo Records Madman soundtrack, available everywhere. So, and last but not least, I know I'm kind of going over, and thank you so much for those who have stuck around to listen to me. I'm on social media. I have a daily horror blog on a platform called Horror Amino. And I don't really critique films, but if there's something dope that I really, really like, I'll share it with you. All the old throwback films, I'll send you IMDb links. I'll encourage you to like go check them out. My music, I'm featured on Beatport. I'm also on Facebook. It's Freak Fineman. I'm on TrackSource. On Instagram, it's Freak Fineman. You can find me on Apple Music. You can find me on Spotify. And here's just some of my works that I've done recently. So with that, that's who I am. And that is the history of horror in motion pictures, y'all. So, thank you for sticking it out with me. And, I kind of had like a special kind of gift for everybody here. I got my main man, Gary Sales. All right. Gary Sales, the producer and maker of Madman, here with us today. If I got, okay, you guys can see it? Can you see the goosebumps? All right, I got goosebumps anyway. So I have my main man, Gary Sales, took time out of his busy filming, producing, writing, scoring schedule to like chill with us today, talk to you guys, answer questions, and just hang out, all right? And with that, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Gary Sales. Unmute, Gary. Unmute. I think you're muted, Gary. Can you unmute your screen?
Boom. Okay.
Yes.
You can hear me now.
All right. Sorry.
All right.
Yes.
Hey, y'all. I already gave you special passage there in the chat. Everybody on this presentation will have safe passage in the woods from Madman. Life. So it's a pleasure listening to you speaking, Freak. You really got it down. And I'm very happy to be here and listen to, this rundown on this long history of the horror genre, which is just a piece of everybody's soul, no matter how you do it. There's all kinds of things out there, but it gives us an outlet for all those dark thoughts and all those imaginings that we have. But I certainly can answer any questions if anybody has any questions about Madman. If that's here, pipe up on the chat. The shirt that Freak's wearing, that's the original look. The poster that was up all throughout there, that was a different one that came later. We love it. And we're hoping that everybody just, is out there. If you can join the Facebook page, Madman Mars Movie, you can check in with us. We've got all kinds of things to talk about there on a regular basis. So if anybody's got any questions, I can answer them and about whatever you have to ask about that. It was quite a business making it. It was back in the day, 1980. And, we had to go 35. We kicked around whether we should go 16. And we ended up coming up with finally deciding then that 35 meant pro back in the day for what we were looking for. And so, this was years after George Romero broke ground. And so we were coming in there right in the same timeline as Halloween, Friday the 13th. By the way, Halloween is that's probably my favorite horror film ever, in the sense of, if you watch that film carefully, you may think you saw a knife go into somebody or blood. You didn't see anything. It's all movie making suspense. It's the best kind of, he didn't rely on any gore. He didn't rely on anything but getting you tense. And he really did it in the music, using the high notes and the low notes, that low bass cello-y thing, pulling along the he had a little top stuff that gets you going, gets you on both ends of your body. So it was a very, very adept filmmaking in its day and done on a budget like nobody's business. So they did it really cheap, but it had lots of quality and lots of heart in it. And to this day, it still scares me to watch that picture. What he brought to it also was the idea of a villain you can't kill. No matter what you do, you keep doing it, and you think you got him, and he keeps coming back. And that was an interesting twist on things in that day. I don't think anybody had really done that inside the same movie. They might have done it and you thought you got him, and then they came back with the sequel. No, he rose again. But I think that was one of the first times they ever it was unstoppable. Fire, gunshots, nothing took him out. So it was definitely a great film to watch. But I'm really happy that you invited me today, Freak. I didn't get don't get an opportunity to sit out much and talk to fans and and hear what you have to say about this stuff. I've never heard your full rap on this, so it was great to get to actually see you go through the whole thing and all the stuff that's coming down. Hopefully, my friends, will get the Madman sequel out. We're working on not a sequel, but a reimagining first, and then there's a sequel. There's actually a whole series that's getting put together right now in terms of where it could go, because there's a lot that can go on. There's a lot to that story that never really got to be told. Right after we made the movie in 80, by the time they got us out, it was about 83 and 82, but by the time we were really circulating, and at that point, when we first went to the American film market in 1980, when we started making the movie, there were 15 pictures slated to arrive. When we got there were 130. So the whole business was shifting very rapidly, because movies like Friday the 13th came out and they were made for $600,000, independent picture, and picked up by Paramount. It was the first time a major motion picture studio that didn't make their own picture, like a Dracula or Halloween or Frankenstein, picked up an independent movie and put it into distribution, and it went through the roof and did $60 million of business in 1980, or early 1979, actually. And every studio in Hollywood at that point, of course, because they're all very sheep-like, everybody had to follow. And they went like crazy trying to find pictures. So they bought anything that they could find that had any semblance of horror to it to be able to make that kind of money. The director, Armin Mastriani, sold He Knows You're Alone to MGM. He made a $600,000 deal. No, he did $1.2 million on a $600,000 movie that he did back then in the day. And he's gone on to do a lot of TV directing, He's still doing business out there. But it just started the whole craze for horror, and it was a very interesting time to be a filmmaker then and find something to do. My partner and I were trying to figure out how we were going to break in the day. And our choices back then, because video did not exist. In 1980, it was just picking its nose up over the edge of the bed there. And the choices were pornography, action adventure, or horror. Those three didn't actually need a star. You could sell the action adventure, or you could sell the horror, pornography, of course, sold itself. But that was run by the mafia pretty much in that day, and it wasn't really a great choice to have a career moving forward. So we decided to jump on the horror. We knew a lot of people that were doing things. We figured we could make it work. So that's what dragged us into that and got us going. And then, by the way, Freak, you mentioned working out at Quad Studios in New York. That was at on 7th Avenue, 47th Street. Our offices were in that building. We were on the 7th floor. Quad was on the 4th floor. And I ended up doing the recordings for the songs in Madman in Quad.
Wow.
So that was interesting that you mentioned that. I remember Tupac actually got shot in the lobby of that building.
He was recording in the room that we recorded, Scoop and I recorded Freak Somebody. So that's where like everything went down. And then, he had a scuffle in that room. And then in the elevators when he got banged up. But, hey, Gary, what's really crazy, man, is my brother Lee, my dad took us to see Halloween in 1978. And
there we go.
When I brought the videotape home of Madman from the video store, my dad, Lee, and myself, man, we watched your film. Dude, we used to go to this spot, man, in Michigan called Gun Lake every summer. It's kind of like little campgrounds and everything, family vacation. Dude, my only video. Dude, my only video I took there, and we would stay there for literally like 7 days. Dude, I never told you this, my only video cassette I took there was Madman. I watched it every single night. Every single night, to the point where my mother, father, dude, all the kids knew the theme song in the beginning, man, knew TP's theme song. So like, yo, man, it's an honor, like, yo, I talk to you all the time. You're a super, super positive guy. You're a great influence on me. Dude, I really appreciate and respect, how dope you are, man, how you interact with your fans. You've never come across as some arrogant Hollywood, kind of, big wig that doesn't have time for the people that supports him, man. So, much respect to you, brother.
Yeah, well, I'm all this stuff comes from the ground up. I feel strongly about foundation. So I try to stay real in that respect. That's where I grew up. I grew up with people, so I can't do it anyway, but I appreciate that. But by the way, Quad was Quad Radial. That was the full name, if I'm correct. It was Quad Radial Studios, it just came to my head as we were talking. Madman also, in terms of talking about the music, Madman, at the time I had been coming out of school, I had been studying electronic music. And this is even before the day of synthesizers, really. We were working with mainframe computers, doing punch cards, the old school. It took me a month to put 30, to do a 30-second piece to put cards together and had to deal with every parameter of sound. This card for pitch and this card for volume and this card for tone and all this stuff. But Madman adds the first electronic music soundtrack of any horror movie around. It's not digital, it's an analog soundtrack. And so we just put that out last October through Mondo. So it's up there on the Mondo site, and I have them on the Madman site. People can get them from me. I've been shipping them out, sometimes with signatures if they want it, whatever. So it's an interesting track because Steve Horlick, and everybody gets a kick out of this one. I remind them, is a Grammy Award Winning composer. except he's doing my horror film, but he won his Grammy for Reading Rainbow. So on PBS, on Channel 13, for doing stuff for kids.
Nice.
So, but it took me a long time to track him down because at the time I was going to do it myself because I was working with ARPs and Buchlas and stuff, and I was intent upon, I'd written some songs that are in the movie that are in there. But then I just, I was first time producer on that level. I've been producing a lot of industrials before that, but when I got to doing that, all of a sudden I realized, wow, this is a big full basket of stuff here. I can't do every damn thing. I got to delegate this out. So I hunted the city and I go around all these places like the Kitchen and the Bottom Line, anywhere I could find places where they were doing stuff, City College or Columbia, where they were doing early electronic music. I mean, this is the days of Morton Subotnick and Silver Apples of the Moon, Golden Apples of the Sun stuff that most people don't know about, all that. And Wendy Carlos, of course, was Walter Carlos. He was one of the first transgender people I ever heard of. He changed, he moved into his new personality, his new self white while he was composing. And so these are the people who were doing electronic music those days. There wasn't any, none of the big companies took it over yet. It didn't come till a little later. So finding Steven playing with his band, the Electronic Art Ensemble, was like such a find for me because I was getting pretty nervous while they were cutting. When am I going to get this together, get all these tracks ready to go? So I saw him at a place one night. I might have been the Kitchen, where all that kind of cool shit was going down, and we met up, and that gave birth to the, I gave him a bunch of themes that I was thinking of, and he went and took them and ran with them. To this day, one of my favorite ones is what I said to him, don't copy instruments. I mean, I don't mind if something sounds like violin or stuff like that, but I'm not trying to. I want you to find sounds that fit, that are maybe newer stuff that we haven't heard. And so he took that, but one of my favorite moments is when Madman comes down from the tree and is this descending. It sounds violin-y and stuff like that, but it's to me, it's so creepy. It's a creepy sound. And I really enjoyed working with him on that. And but there's a million stories. It took, you go through hell and heaven when you're making a movie. No matter how you do it, there's, you win a few, you lose a few, and you just keep on rocking. There's nothing else you can do. And things change. When I work with new people now, all young people making movies, and everybody's young to me these days. What can I tell you? They are, the types of equipment that everybody has now. What you can do by just walking out with a freaking iPhone. You're shooting 4K with an iPhone. I mean, it's astonishing and the audio levels, everything sounds fantastic, and you get yourself a little Ronin and you hook it onto your iPhone, and you got smoothness and you can go out and shoot. So anybody who is a budding filmmaker out there wants to do this, it's the same line that everybody else tells you, all the older guys told us. You want to do it, you go do it. Like Spike would say, whatever means you got, by whatever means necessary. You don't need the biggest, baddest. You don't need the star. What you need is the heart and the soul and maybe a new expression that nobody's seen that you're doing that nobody else understands yet. I mean, shit, how people pissed all over rock and roll in the early days because they were doing Bobby socks or shit. They didn't understand it. And they dumped on punk and they dumped on all these genres and they dumped on hip hop. And now you see what happens when people hold on to it. So you got an idea and you got feeling and you got the story to tell. You just go do it with whatever you can. And you never give up. If it doesn't work out quite right, you're going to learn something from having done it. And that's an important thing to learn. We learned so much by making Madman. My late partner, Joe Giannone, he was the director and he wrote the screenplay from the story that we created together, which basically came from my life as a camper in the Catskill Mountains. And Madman was actually the Cropsey legend, was what we were working with. And we were going to call it that and keep it that until the last minute. And any of you watched the DVD and looked at the history of it, you'd know the story. Basically, we were in the middle of casting and we found out actors are coming in every day and saying, gee, this is real familiar here, this scene here where I'm supposed to do this thing and this guy's head's cut off and all this shit. My boyfriend, finally one girl came in when they said, my boyfriend's working on a movie up in Buffalo right now. I helped him read. I was reading for him to get him for his audition. Seems very similar to me about this story. So we started hunting around. Our production manager knew whoever it was working on the movie up in Buffalo, and we get them to ship us the script. And we're blown away because somebody's doing the Cropsey legend. This is a public domain legend, so we really kept it under wraps. We didn't want to tell anybody and let the cat out of the bag. But now we're sitting there on a Friday night saying, what the hell are we going to do? We're in the middle of casting. We're 3 weeks from going to principal photography. And there's somebody else ahead of us, several weeks ahead of us, making the same story. So that was a pretty crazy time where we literally shut down for a weekend, and he got us their script and we read it and we redid Madman to suit what that was. And Madman was the Cropsey, and we had to come up with another name to make it work at that point, because these guys were going to be done and they were going to be in the American film market before we would, and we didn't think that would work. So I was working on using, when I was trying to do the music, before I brought Steve on, when I was working on finding themes and ideas to use, I was working with the great Holst, Gustav Holst's The Planets. And if you've never heard that, it's a great tone poem, and each planet gets its own theme and its own song. And I was working, of course, with Mars, because Mars is the god of war, and Mars had his heaviest tones and his heaviest stuff going down. So when we were looking around for a name, it just dawned on me one day that, okay, there'll be Madman Mars, and we'll work with that theme. And that's how it slipped in. And that's how so many things slip in art and music and shit. You know, your life brings them to you as you're going along. And if you're keen to it while you're working, your mind is open to receive what's there. You know, even if you're feeling dead, you know, in between things, or things are hard to do, the world starts talking to you because you have some premise for what you're doing every day. And all of a sudden you can fit life into what the day that you're doing. And it's a great experience. I long for that all the time. I mean, being in production and being in any kind of production, whether we're shooting or in writing mode or music making mode, that moment where you're in play, you're open to the universe at that point. And if you keep yourself open, you know, you really get stuff. You know, you can suddenly, something happens, you catch a little clip on the news, or somebody said some shit to you, and it just sticks with you because somehow it relates to what you're doing. So little things like that came along and do that. I don't know if anybody know what movie that was that we ran against. If anybody knows Madman's history, anybody want to kick that in the chat? You know what movie we were up against? It was pretty nasty and astounding.
I don't. I do know that the Crosby, the legend, that legend is like The Hook, right? Like when you hear stories about like the hook that got left in the car, I think they attribute that killer, because it's a true story, to like the Hook legend, to like, oh yeah, I was driving and somebody tried to attack me and there was a hook left in the car.
There's that one where when all is said and done, the hook is still hooked on the car after they drive away. They get away, and then there's a hook in the door. Some of that was attributed to Madman, but this was the upstate, and I'd say, Freak nailed it right there. He put it in the chat. This was upstate New York Catskills, where everybody was going to summer camp when I was a kid in the late 60s, 70s, and shit like that. And this was a story of a mad farmer who supposedly, we would have campfires, and if you didn't clean up your campfire right, you could fuck shit up, and all of a sudden there'd be a forest fire, and he was apparently his house burned down, his children died in it, so he was out to get any of the people that were camping out and doing that. He'd be killing people, and his thing was he'd grab you, and you'd find one of your buddies with their head cut off, hanging upside down from a tree. We embellished on all these things, gave him an axe to work with, and we moved him into this idea of having some axe qualities along those lines. And that worked out pretty good. We had some good guys working on us. It's funny, you talked about Nosferatu. They just remade that. I mean, I don't know if has anybody's been seeing it, because I believe that it was up as a series now, that they made it about a year and a half ago. And I think it's out as a series.
It's
the guy that started his career.
Yeah, Gary, the series is it's not about Nosferatu. It's about a town and a girl who, I think it's on AMC, I believe. Yeah, it's pretty good.
That's right.
Yeah, but it has really nothing to do with Nosferatu, the vampire, Count Orlok. Nothing to do with that.
Nothing at all, really.
Nothing.
Doesn't he prey on children in this thing in order to get his life force?
Yeah, but he's not a vampire. He's kind of like this aging. He's like this aging dude. What do you say, Lee?
What is it called?
Nosferatu.
Lee?
It is called Nosferatu.
Yeah. They use the name. I don't know how they managed to do that and do something else, but no accounting for that.
Yeah, they spell it different.
What was what I was about to say is the guy that I hired, Richie Alonso, to do the work on Madman. It was his first movie as a special effects makeup guy. Well, he did all the makeup on that. And if you look him up on IMDb, his list is stellar. I mean, he went on from there to become a really big. I've been trying to get him to work with me. If I get the remake off the ground, I'd love to get some of the old people together who's still out there making it big time and doing stuff. It would be great to get the team together and do that. The guy who's shooting Creepshow right now, Rob Draper, is a good buddy of mine. He's the DP. He did the first season. They're in the middle, I think, of the second season right now. And when things come together, Rob's up to shoot it. So that'll be a wonderful experience. And I write about it on Madman Mars movie on Facebook all the time. So there's all kinds of information there about it. If it starts to get moving again, people can check in with me and stuff like that. And then definitely, if you got money, just call me. Got movie making money, just call me up.
I was gonna say, I remember, that there's this may be for 40 and up, but going through the video store, it was a big to go through a video store through the horror section, because you just had to pick your movie, or you get the 3 for $5 on the weekend. I saw Madman because I remember it was all about the covers. It was all about the covers in those days, the cover would really gravitate you to the rental. And for those of you guys, I'm probably sure people will see it if you haven't seen it after this session. But, and I didn't know you were going to be on here. But I remember you couldn't, it was one of those movies me and my brother would, play around with after, kind of oh, don't say Madman Mars loud.
Right, right. But Freddie, what you bring up is the basis of all marketing, really, which came and the movie people knew it earliest. It was all about what they used to call in the day the one sheet, which is the poster. People would sell an entire fucking movie on a one sheet. They didn't even have the people. I mean, back in the day, Canon releasing back in the 70s was big for that. They'd take out full page ads in Variety and all that, showing they got this star and that star, and it's this action. It's a lot of stuff with the Belgian action star got done that way. They didn't have the shit together yet, but they did have the companies. They had that all knit up, the European companies and the foreign sales ready to go. And at the very bottom, you look on the fine print of things, says not contractually obligated. So they're just talking about who they'd like to have on there. But the one sheet would be the thing that they could in the meeting room behind closed doors. This is what they'd be pitching to the money people, and then out there in the public, that's what they'd be showing to be able to get bites there, and they would build whole movies off of that, and that holds true to today. I mean, you've got to have a thing like if you look behind Freak there, you see that's the original Madman poster behind him on the wall. That was designed by Paul Ehlers, the actual Madman himself, who was a graphic artist. And Paul is also known as a knife designer. He's up there with the biggest knife designers in the world. He does fantasy knives for Arabian Sheep. It costs $17,000, $18,000 a knife. But that was our original design that we presented to the movie company when we got picked up. They, of course, came out with something in the end. It was more like what Freak's wearing right now. And there was even another thing more like this look here. That was on one of the earlier ones as well. And theirs was a little different. It's got a white background. I don't have one nearby and in front of me. But those covers, that's what counts in this business, Everybody does a different one. Here's one here. Madman's got a release through Arrow Films in England, and that's their version, which is pretty cool looking. Very different.
That's
thing.
one of my favorites right there. Yeah, I love
that's
that.
a good one. My killer favorite is the German one, which I don't have because they guys have kind of dissed me a little bit. They haven't sent me the box. I got the images. It's one of the great ones. But that's the fun thing. But you still have to maintain your original image as much as possible. I mean, that's what kind of happens there. People get used to something, and it's a logo, it's a brand. You know, that's what we're living in brand world. So, Madman has a brand. I even have that silhouette of him as a trademark now, so that I can use that for further things. But again, back to that. Listen, I don't want to be too long-winded. I'm really happy here to be able to talk about it. It's not too often I get to yak with a bunch of people who are interested in this stuff to talk about it. And I'm pleased that you invited me to come by. And I'm very appreciative of that. And I hope everybody's doing well under these troubled times. And listen, all you motherfuckers, get out there and vote.
Done it.
All right. Whoever's voted, just say, put that hand up there. Let us know you done doing it.
As they say, vote early and vote often.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I hear you. You know, we know that there are people trying to do that. That's what he's worried about. But that's it for me, man. Unless anybody's got a question, I will wish you a good night, but I'll be happy to answer anything you'd like to know. Oh, by the way, and Freak nailed it. The movie that we ran into when we were doing that was called The Burning. And that movie was produced. It was the first movie made and produced by none other than Harvey Weinstein and his brother. And that was pretty freaky. He didn't mean much then. It was just some other people out doing stuff. You know, we didn't really have any recognition of that. And so he's become an interesting character in the world. One
question. Do you know if, Madman is on any of those streaming sites? Like,
yes.
Okay.
Madman is on Tubi TV right now.
Okay.
You can see it. It's literally, that's what's taken over in the streaming world now. Is it used to be SVOD, streaming video on demand. Now it's AVOD, advertised video on demand, because the advertising's gotten in. For those people who don't want to spend money on a subscription, you can get it for free, but you got to put up with some commercials. We're also on Google TV. We're on Indie Rights, which is the company that actually handles Madman in the electronic world. They're a great company. If you got something ready to show, I recommend you check Indie Rights out. They're fair. They're indie filmmakers themselves, and they will train you how to use Facebook and social media to promote your own movie. And they make a very simple deal. They don't take a lot of money and spend it. And then, those of you who are trying to make movies, if you don't know the drill, the distributor will go out there and spend a fortune, claiming to spend a fortune, manufacturing, making the art and all that. And it's necessary and it's got to get done, but they'll spend a lot, but they'll take that money out before you ever see any of yours on most deals, unless you're able to pull a cool deal. So they don't do that. They basically want you as independent filmmakers to learn how to promote your own movie. Why? Never existed before. We could never do the shit we're doing right now. Me talking to you, this is non-existent. And this is like, as far as I'm concerned, this is Sufi land. This is astral projection. I mean, if those motherfuckers look forward from their historical place in the world and they may have seen this. And that's where they came up with this idea that you can project yourself across the planet. But now we all can do that. Everybody's got a TV studio and a motion picture camera in their pocket. And so we can send to and receive. And that's what makes this world, so intense with what's going on. There's so many stories being told, But this will get me into my random access rap, which is like, what's made this all possible is the difference between when I grew up, I could only see Wizard of Oz once a year when CBS decided to put it on. Lee, you got some years, you know what I'm talking about. And then all of a sudden out comes videotape. When my daughter's a young kid. I mean, I may have seen Wizard of Oz maybe, 8-10 times in my life when I caught it. By the time she was 6 years old, I saw that bitch in movie about 200 times. We watched it over and over and over. It's just, the world has changed. And we watched it when we wanted to. We didn't have to wait for anybody to put it on. And that idea of random access is what we live with now. And nobody really, if you're coming into it new, it's not something you'd think about. You'd only know it if you're coming from the old days. If you take it way back to where Freak was starting with the history of horror, you didn't get this stuff except if you went to the movies. And they told you when you'd see it and how you'd see it. And, 40 million people a week used to go to the movies back in the day. And then all of a sudden along comes television. You got a little taste of getting it a little more. And then along comes video, and then you get random access. Now you can go to the video store and pull it home, watch it when you're out. Now we got streaming, and we got what we got, and it's changed it to the most incredible thing that no one could have projected in terms of the availability and the availability. And again, the change in the equipment, making it as easy as it is, and it's not necessarily easy, but as useful as it is for as low a price as it is, has given so many people, it's democratized the business so that everybody can turn out their expression and do what they got to do. It's an amazing time to feel creative and to have something to say and to make movies or music or any kind of literature right now. I mean, I'm getting stuff from VR people right now, which is the next phase where we're heading to. And some of the things they're trying to put together there, it's a whole new game, another new game, and we're all gonna find our way into it. Anyway, I'll cut my rap because I just go on and on. Peace, everybody.
Gary, thank you so much for joining us. It's always a pleasure seeing you. Appreciate you coming on board. Dean, thanks a lot, man. Great presentation.
Yeah.
Anybody else have questions for Dean?
By the way, you got the best sounding situation in the group. Last time I saw you was your birthday, Lee.
Yeah, that's right. In New York. Yeah.
Yes, in New York, downtown, in that bar downtown. Yeah. Man,
Bar 13.
Huh?
Bar 13.
Yeah. Yeah, that world is in tough times now. I can't pull that shit off lately.
No, it's been difficult.
It is difficult. But New York's cooking. I mean, on the streets, people are out there. It's hard to do the inside, but the curbside constructions are all over the place. People are eating out. They're doing music in the streets. I see lots of it in Harlem where I am.
Nice.
And it's important. But all right, Dean, Freak, it's all yours, brother.
Yeah, all I'd like to say is thank you, Linda, Lee, Freddie, TCG Collective, 42nd Parallel, everybody who joined to listen to me do my little thing. I love horror, and I just encourage everybody, if you're creative, be creative, do creative things. I need as much inspiration to make better music, to be a better person. So kudos to everybody out there who's aspiring to do something. And, if I could leave you with this, just do it, just be yourself. There's going to be a lot of people, me and Lee, we come from this, Gary, Freddie, we all come from this. There's going to be a billion people who are going to say, you can't. No, you can't. You shouldn't. You wouldn't. Don't. If you listen to them, you'll never live your dreams. I'm a product of living my dreams because, I just believe that I can do something, just something positive. Horror is a positive outlet. I'm not a agoraphobe or anything like that. I have the utmost regard for creativity. And that was just something that, I really gravitated towards. The music that I make, even though I'm a crazy dude, there's no profanity in my music. I just chose not to do it. I don't advocate any type of violence. But again, when I make music, there's a horror movie in the background just for inspiration. So, whatever inspires you to be positive, to be creative. And, if you get on, that's a dirty word. When you get on, always, like Gary did and Lee did for me, they helped me out in so many regards. They didn't give me anything. I'm hungry, but, reach one and teach one. If you get an opportunity to do something and you get into a space, put somebody else who is deserving, put that next hungry, good person on. This is not a situation where, we're crabs in a barrel. You putting somebody on is only gonna, accentuate your brand, and it's gonna make you feel good. you know, and if anybody has any questions for me, you know, you can find me on social media, Freak Fineman. Hit me up. I would love to, you know, talk to you. We can talk horror. My blog, I'm on Horror Amino Freak Fineman every day. I'm posting, join it. It's like a horror community. A couple guys that I know got together about 4 years ago, wanted to do a blog specifically for horror, all things horror. Let's get on there. Let's talk, interact with other people. And there's just, you know, there's a no hate tolerance policy on there. You know what I'm saying? I'm trying to be like Mr. Lee Farmer. I'm one of the curators of Horror Amino. So, you know, if you have any issues with, you know, gender, race, politics, religion, that's not the platform. Everybody is welcome. Let's get down, talk horror, talk about the things that make you go creepy in the night and that go creep in the night. And thank you, everybody. I appreciate everything. Humbly yours.
Thank you, Freak. Thank you, Gary. Happy Halloween, everybody.
Yeah.
I think this is a great way to go into this weekend.